Hi, I'm Jennifer Fletcher. I'm faculty at Cal State Monterey Bay, and sitting next to me is...
I'm Chris Beam. I work at the CAT office here, Center for Academic Technologies, and I have some experience doing community theater, mostly musicals, but some plays as well.
So what we're going to do for you in this video is share a little dramatic reading. We're going to do a scene from Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, but we're also going to talk a bit about elements of dramatic performance. And my background is in literary criticism. I am trained as an educator and a critic. I am not trained in theater, but I do have experience trying to translate plays into classroom performances, and I can tell you how challenging that experience can be, especially when your actors are 12, 13, 14 years old, or even seniors in high school. And one of the requirements for prospective English teachers in the state of California is that they have some experience with dramatic performance, and in particular with concepts like dramatic arc and blocking. So I thought we were really fortunate to have Chris as a resource at our university who lives in both worlds, and I wanted to use this as a chance to kind of show what goes on in an actor's brain when he's preparing for a role, and then you'll see our interpretation of the scene. So I wanted to ask you, Chris, what do you think about when you're preparing for a role? How do you go about it?
Well, the first thing you need to know is as much information as you can about the character, what's the character's part in the performance, in the whole play. You want to know it from a perspective of each character. It fills a role in the overall arc of the show, or the overall arc of the play. There's good guys and there's bad guys, those kinds of arcs. But it's more important, I think, to think of that every character thinks that they are the good guy. Right, so that you don't want to just be like gnashing your teeth and twirling your mustache if you're the bad guy, because nobody really thinks of themselves in that way, including characters in plays. So you want to come from it from a perspective of trying to find the humanity in that person. What's that person bringing to this conversation? And is the more time that you have with this, obviously, the better it is. You can really research it. You can think about it. It takes time to really get that level of involvement in the character's life. But it can all sound very pretentious as well. I just want to say, but really, it is a process of thinking about it, thinking about how that person relates to you, how you can find the humanity in that person. I know there's a quote that says you can't help but love anyone if you know their story. Mm-hmm. So you figure out that person's story and figure out where they're coming from and why they made those decisions, and then you can start to see the similarities in your own life. I guess that's the main thing you want to do when you're trying to develop a character. It's a lot of experimentation. It helps to have feedback. It helps to have somebody saying, that's too much. That's more there. I want more of that, because we're a terrible judge of our own abilities and what we are presenting out to others. So I think it all depends on how much time you have. I think that the best thing you can do, though, is understand the play, understand the context of that character, and just feel like that character has some relevance to your life. I think that's the best thing you can do. So.
Well, and this course looks really closely at Shakespeare's kind of incredible understanding of human complexity, of the full range of human experiences and human emotions. So his villains, and Shylock and the Elizabethan world was certainly treated as a comic villain.
Right.
But he's a villain that invites you in, and I think that's one of the reasons why in productions in later centuries, Shylock becomes a deeply sympathetic character. He absolutely is someone that we can identify with.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what's the best advice you've ever received as an actor?
Yeah, so the best advice I've ever received is just the idea of being sincere. It's believing in the words you're saying, and not even trying to add too much to those words. Say the words in a sincere way, and it'll come across to the audience in a sincere way. If you try to manufacture a way that somebody should be, then it comes off very phony. And an audience is very good at picking that up quite quickly. I mean, there are some amazing trained actors who do stage work that have an incredible range of performance, of highs and lows. And if that same performer did the same thing in front of for a TV show, he would be a ham, right? So you got to know where you're at, and you got to present in that way. So there's a great the play I Hate Hamlet. Have you ever seen that one? Oh, it's a fantastic play. But the ghost of John Barrymore comes back to help a young aspiring TV actor how to play Hamlet, right? So and he's just at a whole other level from all the other actors on stage, and it's hysterical because every time he walks on, it's "Hello, everyone," and there's comedy there because he's at a completely different level. And the line he says is that I have the emotional capacity of 10 men. I am not a ham. I am a crowd. So anyway, but it's the idea being that you need to figure out where you're at. If you're just reading in a classroom. You want to find the level that's going to be appropriate for the class. You don't want to be jumping around and swinging swords and all that for that kind of a presentation. So believing those words, actually reading the words and saying them in a sincere way is going to be so much more powerful than any sort of affectation that you can do to it. So
well, and Hamlet talks about that himself, right? There's acting advice in the play
That's right.
Hamlet, and
That's
you
right.
really get some clues there that Shakespeare probably worked with his share of bad actors who would saw the air with their hands and all the other things he says not to do.
It's called indicating, is when you're just like, I'm going over here now, and it feels phony, and everyone's going to do it to varying degrees, and it's not a bad thing, but just remember that you want to try to present your material in as honest and as sincere way as possible, and the audience will appreciate that. It's so I think that's probably the best advice I ever had. Just believe the words.
Great. So what's blocking?
Okay, blocking is basically how the actors are positioned on stage with their props and the set, and how they move from one position to another during the performance. So you got to plan that out. You can't just have that happen randomly, because people just bump into each other at the basic level, and you need to think about how you're orienting the action so that the audience's eye is drawn to the most important thing as it's happening. So,
which means you need to understand what is most important. You need to understand something about theme, about meaning.
Absolutely. And I mean, so there's a physical aspect of the orientation to the audience. One of the things that you do is what's called cheat to the audience. So if you and I are having a conversation on stage, I'm not going to turn to you like this and have a conversation, whereas we might do that in real life. But since the audience is on this side, we're going to cheat to the audience. So we have a conversation like this. It's at 3/4 angle to the audience. So you're open. You want to open your chest to the audience as much as possible and turn and look to the person on stage. So just little simple things like that make it so the audience gets to participate in the action in a much more open way. So blocking is it's very important, and someone has to write it down. Basically, if you're going to do an involved kind of piece, it has to be prepared beforehand.
And who makes those decisions?
The director is the one who usually says, "All right, I want you here." And quite often, when you're blocking a show or a play, the director will have an idea beforehand, gone through and said, okay, I want this person stage right, I want this person over here, and then by the end, I want this person here, but may not have nailed down exactly every move that every actor's going to make, because actors want to have some flexibility as well. And so he'll say, during this speech, when it feels comfortable for you, kind of make your way down here, but by the end, I want you to be here so you can turn and look at the person in a dramatic way. So that's so the rules are different for all situations, and they change. With a good director and a good cast, it'll change as the action changes, as people's interpretations change. One of the best things I can say, I don't know if it's exactly blocking, but advice I have for people is what's called throwing focus. All right, so the idea being like, right now you're looking at me, so I am the focal point of what's happening. even though I'm not necessarily even looking at the audience. I'm looking down here, but you're looking at me, and that gives me the focus of what's happening. So if one person is talking, the other people should be looking at that person, should be paying attention to that person, and that person then becomes the more important thing. If you have somebody giving a speech, and then somebody's over here going, it totally draws the focus. It takes it away from what's happening. So
it's a way of pointing to the action.
Yeah. So as opposed to just actually pointing at the action, you use your eyes. And it's an amazingly effective tool. If suddenly people in the audience, or suddenly people in the cast are looking at this book.
Right. We want to know what people are looking at.
That becomes the focus.
Sure.
So those kinds of subtle things that you do, it's part of blocking. It's part of that whole process of how you move around from one place to another. And it can be quite a puzzle, actually. Sometimes it becomes very mechanical. Because I need this person to be here by this line because he's got to stab somebody. So then we have to change all these other things to get to that end goal. So some people will they'll start at the end of a scene and they'll block backwards because usually the more dramatic moments are happening near the end of the scene. So that's the more pivotal place, and how they get into the room isn't as important. So
really interesting. And in this class, we look at how Act 3 in a Shakespearean tragedy, for instance, contains the climax.
Right.
So I would wonder if maybe some directors would actually start there and both work through to Act 5 and then backwards map to Act 1, but to really make sure that pivotal moment has the focus of the
You want to
play.
lock that down. You want to make sure that is the moment. In singing, they do the same thing. There's usually a high note in every phrase, and you want to make sure that you're prepared for the high note of that phrase. Even if you're starting down here, if you start if you start too heavy down here, you won't be able to get up to that high note. So you have to prepare your voice for what you're going to be singing, not what you're singing now. And it's a little esoteric, but yes, you have to prepare for the actual climax. That's where you want people to get that.
Right.
Everything is just chess pieces up to that point until you get to that.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. So you're hearing a lot about choices in preparation, and we're going to show you in just a moment some of the different choices that you would have if you were demonstrating a play, some lines from a play for your classes, if you're going into a career in education, or if you are working with students and you're going to be kind of coaching them through a production. I've got one more question for Chris before we do that.
Yep.
What's dramatic arc?
So dramatic arc is kind of what we were just talking about there, is that every scene, every sentence really has a point that is the most significant moment. It's the moment that this all kind of crystallizes around. And so when you write a play, you have that third act that you're building towards. That's going to be the top part of that arc. And then as things resolve, you come down on the other end. But the slow build here, so you can map out how this play, how the whole interaction of the play is. You can map out each individual scene in the same way. Say the scene starts out, they're walking in, and they're just talking, and then something happens, and then we have this dramatic, this real upswing in what's happening, and then there's usually a little bit of a letdown right at the very end. Even it doesn't have to be, things can be more sophisticated than that. Sometimes scenes pull from one to another, and there's a little inset scene in between. But you understand that there's this arc that happens in each scene and happens with each character in the play. Each character starts out at a certain place and ends at a certain place and has this up and down. And it's very important that you're conscious of that as you're constructing this character and how you're going to interact in each scene, because you need to know that, this is the scene where I'm at 9. This is my biggest scene in the whole play. I got to give everything for this one. Whereas if I give everything at the first scene when they first meet me, and I'm actually only supposed to be at a 2 or a 3 here because I'm just the guy walking on and says, "Hi, how you doing?" You don't want to come, "Hi, how are you doing?" And then you've totally thrown off the whole balance. So you have to mark where you are in that perspective. And really, even with every sentence, you could do that with every single sentence. You could take, what is the word in the sentence that I'm trying to get somebody to know about, and that's the one you give the focus to. And It takes time. It takes time like everything else. It's just a factor of analyzing. You got to read through it. You got to read through it again. You got to think about where your character is in the shuffling of all these other people, and where's that moment that your character is, because every character is there for a reason, one way or another. So where is that moment that your character is there for? And that's the one you play towards. And yours could be at the beginning of the play. It could be, you might have a different dramatic arc. Some characters start up high and then, they're dead, And so it's just kind of, I guess, the dramatic arc is just that flow of each character, of each scene, or of the play that changes over time. Yeah, so it's important to be aware of that.
Excellent. I think that's really helpful. And as you're reading Shakespeare's plays, you'll notice that when he writes in verse, the meter itself cues you to some of those important words in the lines, that those are often the words that take the stress, or sometimes he'll do something like shift out of one meter, shift out of iambic pentameter, and move instead to something like he'll have a trochee, he'll go into a trochaic meter, and that's another signal that this special little moment, these words, signal a climax in the line of the speech. So we're going to look at a scene between two characters in The Merchant of Venice. One is a major character, Shylock. The other is a minor character, Tubal, Shylock's friend. But Tubal has a really important function in this scene, and I'm going to be reading the part of Tubal. I don't have a background in theater arts, as I already shared, so I'm one of those actors who would struggle with sincerity, and I will do my best, but maybe my performance will also be reassuring to those of you who think, okay, I'm going to do my best at this, but it is what it is. But I'm going to ask Chris, before we start, to give us a sample of some of the different ways that the first line could be read. We talked already about how important choices are in dramatic performance. And then after he gives that quick little demonstration, I want to give you an overview of how we're going to try to read this, kind of the interpretation that we have of the scene, and see if you can hear what we're trying to do, what our interpretation is.
All right, so the first line is actually kind of difficult as a line, because it's a series of questions where I'm not really getting anything back. So you feel somewhat redundant when you're saying the same kind of question over and over again. And
I should say, too, before you start, so we are in Act 3. This is Scene 1. And it's after Salanio and Salerio have left with Antonio's servant, and it's now right around line 68 or so, where Shylock and Tubal are alone.
All right. So, you could do it in a more dramatic kind of way. How now, Tubal? What news from Genoa? Hast thou found my daughter? And that's kind of a little bit of a dramatic kind of presentation, and that might be a little bit more than is appropriate in some situations. If you were going to be on stage, that might be the level that you would pick, maybe go even a little bit more. On stage, it's always bigger because you don't have that intimacy of a video camera. It doesn't read in the same way. So you have to be bigger so the person in the back row gets what you're doing. And if you were going to do this in a realistic way, I mean, you'd think about, I'm a guy, and I'm just seeing somebody that I know, and I'm going to say, how now, Tubal?
Right.
What news from Genoa? Hast thou found my daughter?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just like a realistic...
Right, what's up?
That's pretty much the same as just us talking, but have you found my daughter? I mean, that's all I'm... So I'm just saying words in a naturalistic kind of way, which has... it's very effective. It's actually very effective. Don't feel that you need to take that affectation of Shakespeare, because that becomes its own play sometimes. It's somebody's like, aha, wherefore art thou? That's all good, and it's important stuff, but it's not necessary for everyone. I think just a sincere reading of it, as opposed to, how now, Tubal? What news from Genoa? Hast thou found my daughter? That's the other thing we want to avoid, because that's just boring, if nothing else. And part of what makes Shakespeare interesting is how it's performed. It's not reading Shakespeare is not nearly as interesting as watching Shakespeare.
Right.
It just really that's the whole other level of it is where it comes out. So I would probably go towards something like the first one that I was doing for this. How now, Tubal? What news from Genoa? Hast thou found my daughter?
and I'll take it from there. And what you'll see in this scene, so Shylock is going to alternate between hope and despair. Tubal is doing something really, really important in this scene. He's kind of sticking the knife into the wound that Shylock has suffered at the hands of the Venetian Christians. And so Tubal, he's Shylock's friend. He is on Shylock's side. He shares the same sense of abuse and oppression. He is also Jewish, so he has likewise been victimized by people like Antonio, and he's really fueling the fires for Shylock's revenge. Shylock is after that pound of flesh that is owed to him through the bond that he secured for the amount of money that Antonio has borrowed from him. And you'll hear how greedy Shylock is for news of Antonio's ill fortune, and watch at the way that Tubal tries to link the possibility for revenge with the ideas of his daughter, Shylock's daughter's betrayal, and all the injuries that Shylock has suffered as a result of his enemies. So we'll take it away with the first line again, and then I'll get my bit.
And I'll probably play around with it a little bit. I may pick different levels just to be illustrative as much as anything. So this is a pretty much a dry run. So we'll just make it what it is. So all right. So how now, Tubal? What news from Genoa? Hast thou found my daughter?
I often came where I did hear of her, but cannot find her.
Why, there. A diamond gone cost me 2,000 ducats in Frankfurt. The curse never fell upon our nation till now. I never felt it till now. 2,000 ducats in that and other precious, precious jewels. I would my daughter were dead at my foot and the jewels in her ear. Would she were hearsed at my foot and the ducats in her coffin. No news of them? Why so? And I know not what's spent in the search. Why, thou loss upon loss? The thief's gone with so much, and so much to find the thief, and no satisfaction. No revenge, nor no ill luck stirring, but what lights o'er my shoulders. No sighs, but o my breathing. No tears, but o my shedding.
Yes. Other men have ill luck too. Antonio, as I heard in Genoa.
What? Ill luck? Ill luck?
Hath an argosy cast away, coming from Tripoli.
I thank God. Is it true?
I spoke with some of the sailors that escaped the wreck.
I thank thee, good Tubal. Good news. Heard in Genoa?
Your daughter spent in Genoa, as I heard, one night, 80 ducats.
Thou stickest a dagger in me. I shall never see my gold again. 80 ducats in a sitting? 80 ducats?
There came diverse of Antonio's creditors in my company to Venice that swear he cannot choose but break.
I am very glad of it. I'll plague him. I'll torture him. I am glad of it.
One of them showed me a ring he had of your daughter for a monkey.
Out upon her! Thou torturest me, Tubal. It was my turquoise. I had it of Leo when I was a bachelor. I would not have given it for a wilderness of monkeys.
But Antonio is certainly undone.
Nay, that's true. That's very true. Go, Tubal. Fee me an officer. Bespeak him a fortnight before. I will have the heart of him if he forfeit, for were he out of Venice, I can make what merchandise I will. Go, Tubal, and meet me at our synagogue. Go, good Tubal. At our synagogue, Tubal.
So, you have an actor and you have an amateur, but it was fun for both of us, and the point is that Shakespeare can be available to anyone, and of course, if you're taking this course thinking of being a future English teacher, your amateurs will be teenagers, so that will be a whole other talent pool to work with. But try some of these techniques out for yourself. and hopefully you can see some of the ways that dramatic performance can actually enhance the work you do as a literary critic as well. Thank you, Chris, and
Thank you. Good luck.